Hello and welcome to this episode of Community Connections, airing right here on OROMIA11. I am your host, Anna Orr, and September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. Today we're going to have a conversation with the executive director of one of the lead organizations in the country dealing with mental illness. We're going to talk about education, we're going to talk about advocacy, and we're going to talk about community support for the people that you love that are navigating this sometimes difficult terrain. This is going to be a wonderful episode you won't want to miss. Sue Abderholden, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited to talk with you. September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And I know that now, since we're beginning fall, it is so important to start talking about resources and taking our mental health journeys seriously. And so I'm excited to have you here as the Executive Director of the National Alliance for Mental Illness.
Thank you.
Now, for people that are not familiar with the work of NAMI here across the state of Minnesota, can you kind of talk to us about the origin of NAMI? You guys are one of the first grassroots and largest national organizations on mental health.
Yes, absolutely. So we started in the 70s, 1977 officially, and it was really a group of family members who came together because the government was going to close down what was then Hastings State Hospital, and they were going to use that funding for other state hospitals. There have been a couple of lawsuits that they needed to reply to. So these families came together and they said, well, if you're going to close that hospital, you need to take that funding and put it into community. And so they were successful in coming to the legislature and getting the first community-based program started. It was called Sharing Life in the Community, or SLIC. And actually, one of the legislators was quoted in the paper as saying, we'll do anything, just call off the mothers. So I think we can't underestimate the power of mothers, right, coming forward, fighting for their children. Our group here actually started before the national organization. So we actually sent people to Madison, where the national organization was formed. We kind of have an internal joke. We call them the NAMI mommies, because they really came together to try to create change. From there, we kind of use three words to describe our work: education, support, and advocacy. So we really want to make sure that people have information about the different mental illnesses, what to do, suicide prevention, all of that. And then we have peer-led support groups. So they're not led by mental health professionals, but we actually train family members and people with lived experience to lead those groups, because I think it's really important to know that you're not the only one on that journey. And then advocacy is our resources about how to navigate the mental health system. We have a helpline that kind of helps people, and then also our legislative work.
I think that is so important and such a unique path for an organization that you all started with families that decided at such a pivotal time when I'm sure mental illness and anything close to it was such a taboo topic.
Absolutely. Yes. You couldn't talk about it at all. And
I
it's
think
hard
right
to
now,
organize anonymous.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say it's hard to organize anonymous, right? So we really needed people to come forward and say, no, this is impacting me or my family.
I think it's so important to have that conversation, not just one-to-one, but like you said, with your family, because whether we want to realize it or not, we're navigating some really difficult times, but also we're also healing with our community involvement.
Yes, absolutely. No one faces a serious illness by themselves. I don't care what it is, and that includes mental illness. So it's really important that you share concerns with family members, that if you're worried about someone, to talk about what you're seeing, and that help is possible, people can get better, and to really open up that conversation.
Now, I just want to start a little bit, like you said, with the three-prong approach you all take with some education for the general public. I think right now with social media and with people doing a lot of independent research of things, we're dealing with a lot of buzzwords. So people are quick to try to diagnose one another or try to self-diagnose even, and it's starting to, I think, weaken or maybe create a stigma around what people are personally navigating.
Yes, sometimes people will say things like, well, I like to be really neat, so I must have OCD. And that's an improper use of the term. These are real conditions. Yes, they're diagnosed differently than, say, cancer or diabetes, but they are real, and it is important to make sure you have accurate information. On our website, we actually have fact sheets about the different mental illnesses. If you go to your primary care physician, they're probably doing a depression screening. They're asking you 5 or 6 questions about how you're feeling, because we want to make sure that we identify things early. I think if you're, thinking about, should I be concerned about something, you have to think about the intensity of the symptoms and the length of time. So if we're talking about a teenager, for example, that might be experiencing depression, they might hold up in their room or somewhere, and teens are going to do that, but they're not going to do it every day, for over a month. So we have to kind of look at those things. The symptoms that we kind of look for are kind of changes. So changes in sleeping pattern, changes in eating, changes in how people are interacting with friends, difficulty concentrating, even just intense worries and fears. So you want to look at changes in people to say, well, maybe you should go get help. Maybe you should go look into this.
We were talking about how often people are probably experiencing things, or intensity is the word that you use, and I think that's really important. How common are mental health conditions in our community right now by the numbers?
It's about 20 to 25% of the population. So it is really pretty high. And again, very common. So anxiety is actually the most common mental illness, followed by depression. And
you
honestly,
talked about
after COVID, anxiety went way up.
I've heard a lot about that, and people saying that they might have felt, I guess you would say, anxious, or they felt a little worried is a word that I kept hearing more times than not. But I don't think people began to think about, is this actually a condition that I may need to seek treatment for or talk to someone about, instead of just trying to power through it?
Yes. And one way to think about it, and I would say that during COVID, pretty much everyone had a day or two or more of feeling anxious or depressed, because we had a worldwide trauma, right? We didn't know when it was going to end. We didn't know how it was going to impact our families or ourselves. And so that was a really difficult time. I would say when it starts interfering with your day-to-day activities, that's when you need to really go see someone and have it checked out. So if you're really struggling, at your job because you're so anxious, or you're having a hard time, making dinner for your family or going to school, it's when it interferes with your day-to-day life that you really want to make sure you get it checked out.
Now, I know you shared earlier a bit about some symptoms and some possible warning signs we should be paying attention to, but they show up a little bit different in everyone. And what I appreciated as I was doing my homework and looking you all's website, you all have things about active service members, children, youth, adults, different things like that, because all of these warning signs and symptoms may look differently.
Absolutely, even among different cultural communities. So often we see things like depression and anxiety show up, frankly, as stomach aches and headaches in some diverse communities. And so people are like, well, it's physical, but it's truly it's a mental illness. It's your mental health that's being impacted. We often think of depression as like a teen, kind of just curling up in a ball, right? It also means anger. Depression can come out as anger as well. And so we wouldn't necessarily think about that. So again, I think thinking about the changes that you see, no matter what they are, physical or, behavioral, you need to check it out.
I think that's very important. Now, switching gears just a little bit, we're talking a little bit more about suicidal ideations, and because September is this awareness and prevention one, I want to try and focus as best I can on this. But what are some ways in which we can support someone that is navigating suicidal ideations or is starting to talk about not being here anymore?
And so recognizing some of those signs of suicidality, I think, are important. So again, people saying, I don't want to live anymore. People really focused on dying. Sometimes people have increased guilt or shame, saying I'm going to be a burden to others, feeling very hopeless, extremely sad. We also see sometimes where all of a sudden people have been kind of very depressed and now they're calm because now they have decided a way out of their pain. And so, really thinking about that, what people are often afraid to do is to ask. And actually, asking does not plant the idea. Asking lets somebody know that you care and that you've seen that they're struggling. So, being very direct, asking someone, are you thinking about killing yourself? That direct is actually really important. And most people will actually answer that truthfully. So, it's important to ask. And then the other thing that would be a part of that is knowing that you is telling them, okay, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to listen. So you don't want to tell them like, oh, you can't do that because of your family. When people are suicidal, their pain is so great that they don't know any way out. And so it's not about other people. So you don't want to guilt them or do things like that. You want to listen to them and say, I'm just really sorry you're feeling this way. Let's get some help for you. And so, again, kind of just think about what people are saying and be very blunt. And if they say, yes, I'm thinking about killing myself, you want to ask them how. What are you going to use? And because then you want to make sure that those things are out of the house. You would automatically make sure that any kind of guns are out of the house when someone is suicidal, for sure. But also locking up, medication, over-the-counter meds, locking all of that up so someone can't get to it.
I think that is so important, what you just said not too long ago. Having the conversation is not planting the seed. It's okay
Correct.
to confront this conversation or that feeling someone is having, and being the most blunt is helpful.
Yes, you don't want to beat around the bush. You don't want them to think, are they thinking what I'm thinking? Do they know? Just say it directly.
I think because people find it to be such a delicate topic, they think they're doing themselves and the person they're engaging with a service by trying to be timid or fragile around the subject.
Right. But it doesn't really help. So just be direct. And everyone should know the number is 988. So that is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you call in Minnesota, you're going to get one of the Minnesota call centers, which is really important. They're open 24/7. They have language translators as well. And they're there for the person who is struggling, but also if you're worried about a family member, loved one, a friend, you can call 988 too to ask for help.
Now, talk to me about some of the ways in which NAMI is standing with people that are navigating suicide, or you guys are trying to talk to the community more about prevention.
So we offer a lot of different classes around suicide prevention. So, many people take a first aid class, right? Kind of a basic first aid class. Well, there's a basic kind of first aid class for suicide prevention. It's called QPR, Question, Persuade, and Refer, which is kind of like question, are you thinking about killing yourself, right? Persuading, hang with me, I don't want you to die. Let's try to get your help, and then referring people to the resources that are available. It's under 90 minutes. It's free. We offer it all the time online through our website. And so it's a good class for people to take if you want some basic information about how to help others. We also do kind of one-on-one. So we're not clinicians. So pretty much everyone here at NAMI, staff, board, volunteers, either live with a mental illness or family members. We're not mental health professionals. But we've all been there. So we all have that lived experience so that we can talk to someone to say, I totally understand. Let's talk about this. You know, we often get family members calling, like, I don't know what to do, and we can help walk them through that.
I think that is so important that you just said, we're all people here at NAMI that have been through it. And we're trying
Yes.
to help you navigate your way through the trees.
It's a pretty, it can be a pretty lonely journey. You know, people are afraid to share it with others. They're afraid of discrimination. You know, will my boss, not promote me or give me a raise if they found out that I have a mental illness, right? I mean, all of those kinds of things. And so when you talk to other people and learn, I think the biggest lesson is that you can get better, that recovery is possible, is really, really important. You're not the only one, and you can actually get better.
Now, for somebody that is watching this and is saying, I think I should begin getting help with my mental health journey, what would you say to them?
So you might want to check in if you have a primary care physician, checking in with them first, just to rule out if it's any other healthcare condition. And a lot of clinics these days actually have a mental health professional on staff located at the clinic so that they can get that referral going right away. I would say you also, frankly, need to look at your insurance card to find out who's in network. There's lots of different types of mental health professionals, psychiatrists and advanced practice nurses and physician's assistants can all prescribe medication, but not everyone needs medication. Therapy is also really important. And so there's a couple of different kinds of therapists. You'll find licensed clinical social workers, marriage and family therapists, psychologists, and licensed professional counselors. And in Minnesota, we're getting better at having diverse professionals as well, because for some people that's really important. And so that's a place to start. In Minnesota, we have community mental health centers and what we call certified community behavioral health centers where they have sliding fee. So if you're not insured, you can go to one of them and you'll be able to get the care that you need at a greatly reduced price as well.
I think that's so important to share with people right now because we know things are becoming more and more expensive by the day. And people are looking at their budgets and starting to think about what they can trim back. And sometimes we think about therapy or our medication or coming to group is one thing that we can trim off. And it starts to become a larger thing that spills into so many other areas of our life. And we know that it'll cost us greatly if we don't pay attention to what really matters, which is our mental health, which contributes to our overall health.
You make an excellent point. I always like to tell people our head is connected to the rest of our body. And if we're going to look at the whole person, we need to think about our mental health and our physical health.
Now, you talked about working with some other communities and things of that nature, but how are you guys at NAMI actively reducing the stigma around mental illness and receiving treatment for mental health?
So there's a couple things that we've been doing. We have a program called Our Journeys, where people from different cultural communities are sharing their story in kind of a storytelling tradition. And so again, someone sharing their story that's from that community helps break down, right, the stigma and kind of the negative attitudes about mental illnesses. We've also created several videos. We have 4 videos online just talking about what mental illness is. And we have one that's in Hmong, Somali, Spanish, and English. And we hope to, of course, add more in the future. And we started translating more and more of our materials too. We don't have infinite dollars, so we're working on it. But I think it's important to have information in people's language so that they can understand it as well. And then otherwise, I would say that we at the legislature, we have actually worked hard to create a more culturally diverse workforce. So one of the things that we found is that we had a lot of people who actually graduated from grad school to become, for example, a social worker, and then never finished and got their license. And what we learned was that, they have to do a certain number of hours of supervision to get licensed, and they couldn't find someone from their community to be their supervisor. So the bill that passed actually funded BIPOC mental health professionals to become supervisors. So we're able to expand the number of people available to do supervision. And so we're really hoping that that kind of gets people, frankly, across that finish line. The other thing that we've been looking at too are the national tests. The national tests are not culturally informed or responsive at all. And so we've had people, particularly from some diverse communities, but also men, because a lot of social workers are women, fail the test. But the people who've been doing their supervision have said that they're wonderful clinicians. So we're also trying to find some alternative pathways to those national tests, so that, again, we have a really diverse and excellent workforce.
I think that is so important to start to talk about the people that are often left behind in these conversations. Like you said, talking about men wanting to become social workers and improve the communities around them, or people that may be interested in seeing someone that looks like them and feeling that's something that's holding them back because someone may not understand if they're from another community or another culture. I may come in here and say something and you don't understand where I'm coming from, and that halts my journey.
You're absolutely correct. And the other thing we've seen too is we don't want someone having to come in and explain how racism impacts their mental health, right? But if the person is from your community, they're going to totally understand. And, I think about it too. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I like to see women doctors because I don't want to have to explain what it's like to be a woman, right? And so I think we just generally want to do that. Now, some people have said, because some communities are very small, that they don't want to see someone from their community because they're going to feel like their business is going to be everywhere. And so we also want to make sure that, frankly, our white mental health professionals also are trained to become, culturally informed and responsive. So in those types of situations, or if there's no one available, they can still do good work.
I think that is so important for people to see as they begin and or continue their journey, that the system is changing and there are people right here at NAMI that care about the communities we come from and are trying to support us individually on our journey.
Yes, absolutely. And we've created a lot of booklets for folks to figure out how do I navigate the system. So we have booklets on the children's mental health system, on the adult mental health system, early episodes of psychosis, which are very scary, and we want to make sure people are getting the best treatment possible. What happens in a psychiatric hospital, how to develop a crisis plan. So we really have a number of different booklets to really help people kind of learn and navigate the system. And we actually just came out with a rack card on the dangers or risks associated with cannabis or marijuana, because we will see increased episodes of psychosis.
That's really important and very timely for you to share, hearing as we just had Minnesota legalize recreational marijuana in our state on the 17th of this month. People need to be aware that psychosis can happen.
And especially with younger users. So if people are starting 14, 15, it can really negatively impact your brain. If there's any history of schizophrenia in your family, there's all sorts of things like that you really need to look at before you start. The brain doesn't finish really growing until age 26. And so we had actually wanted to have the age where you could buy it to be 26 to really, frankly, protect young people's brains. So it's something that they all might want to think about as well.
I think that's very important. Now, we were talking a bit about stigma before and buzzwords with people currently, whether it's on social media or they're reading things online and attaching themselves to these words that they hear, but there's no one there with expertise providing them with the explanation or definitions of what they're actually saying. But there is also another part of stigma there that comes with religious practice. People who feel like I'm supposed to pray it away, I don't need to be medicated, I shouldn't be sharing my personal business outside of this home if I'm struggling with something. What do you say to people that are trying to navigate these things but are also wrestling with their faith?
I mean, I think faith is important for recovery, whether it's a mental illness or a physical illness. But I don't think that if it was cancer or diabetes, that we would just pray about it, right? We would actually use medical treatment that's available. I've often heard from, people in faith communities, leading faith communities saying, if God gave us the brains to develop medication that can help, if God developed, different types of, things that can cure cancer or diabetes or whatever, we would use them. And so, and I think, if you believe in a benevolent God, God would want you to feel good, to be able to experience life. So faith has to be a part of it, I think. And we've seen that people who do have a faith community, because they have a community around them and they're not isolated, they often do better and heal faster. But don't turn away from the very treatments, whether it's medication or therapy, that actually can help you live a fuller life.
I think that's sound advice for people to utilize going forward. Culturally, in the African American culture, we often talk about how, well, you'll say you had Uncle Fred who stayed in the basement and people brought him his food, but he didn't really come out and engage the family. Or you have your cousin who maybe liked the color red and everything was red for them. But we don't always connect the idea that these are signs of mental illness. And so talking to elders at times, they'll say things like, this is new, we didn't deal with this back then. What do you say to someone that feels, I would say, sentiments of the old vanguard around that?
Well, obviously people had mental illness back then. I mean, we had institutions filled with people with serious mental illnesses, right? So it's always been around from the beginning of time. It's how we treat it and how we acknowledge it. So, whether it's sending someone off to an institution for the rest of their life, or the basement, or just not having engaged at all in family and community life, I mean, that's not good. People can get better. And so I think we just have to say, those were the times back then. I mean, we used to use leeches, right? We don't worry about leeches anymore in treatment.
That's true.
So, right? And so we have to think about, well, we've learned, we have new ways of treating things. And so we should be embracing that so that those people can actually live a full life.
I appreciate that more than you know. Now, you all talked about advocacy, and you've talked about working with civic leadership to try and repave the landscape or improve the landscape of mental health. What has been the response from civic leadership, and what does that look like for you all at NAMI helping influence this situation?
It's really improved a lot over the last 20 years because, again, more people are talking about it and people are reaching out to their elected officials. And so we've seen a lot of progress at the legislature to build our mental health system. I like to say our mental health system isn't broken. It was never built. The institutions were not a mental health system. And so for the last 40 years, we've been kind of identifying, treatments and services and supports that work. And now we just have to fully fund them and make sure we have a workforce that will do it. We're still seeing some problems, honestly, with cities, with what we call NIMBY, not my backyard. So, we had the city of Forest Lake who decided they didn't want a children's residential facility there. There was the city of Golden Valley that didn't want a children's mental health day treatment program. We have cities that don't want, a group home in their community and things like that. And what we always have to remind people is that people with mental illnesses are already in your community. So do you want to provide them with the support that they need so that they, again, live their best life? Absolutely. So if you're thinking, well, I don't want those people here, they're already here. They're already in your community. But we have, again, at the legislature, we've really seen bipartisan support for services that work. And that's different than it was 20 years ago, absolutely. So we're making progress. I had a wonderful mentor many years ago who said, when you look ahead and see how much work you need to do, you need to look behind you and see how far you've come.
I think that's powerful. Now, what has the community response been to the work of NAMI so far?
I think it's been good. I think people, see us as a trusted source for information, for help. we have our, big fundraiser this coming weekend and the NAMI walk where thousands of people will show up, which is great. And it's just a wonderful way to say, again, you are not alone on this journey. Look around you. How many people are here to support mental health? So we have lots of wonderful volunteers who lead our support groups and things like that. So I think people generally appreciate the work that we're able to provide to the community. People want more, and I don't disagree that we, have not haven't fixed everything, haven't supported everyone, but I think again we've made great progress. When I came to NAMI 24 years ago, our budget was $160,000 a year. Now we're at $3 million. So we've grown so that we can actually meet the needs of people.
I think that is so important that you said that we are still going and trying to improve what's going on. And then in the spaces where something doesn't exist, we are actively building.
Yes. But I don't want people to think we're just kind of sitting on our high horse. We know there's a lot more work to do.
Now, you mentioned NAMI walks, and that was one of my favorite things that I saw on the website. Mm-hmm. As someone who has people in their community who deal with seasonal affective disorder, it is so important to try and get them outside and moving. And even though the sun is not shining as often or for as long as we like, them getting out and engaging is quite helpful. For people that may be interested in this, can you talk to them about what NAMI walks are?
Absolutely. So it's this coming Saturday, September 27th at Minnehaha Park. It kind of kicks off around 11 o'clock. The program starts at 12:30. There'll be music before that. And then the actual walk is at 1 o'clock. And we walk down up River Road, kind of turning around 36th Street and coming back. So it's a 5K walk. There's no registration fee. If you raise money, if you raise $100, you get a free t-shirt, which is great. We appreciate that. But it's really, there's a resource fair, so there'll be over 60 organizations available to provide information about mental health. There is food trucks. The International Reggae Band will be playing, and they're kind of fun, although I always joke that Minnesotans don't dance in the daylight, but it's still really good music. And it's just really, it's a joyous day. We will have shuttle buses. If you park at St. Kate's, there will be buses there that will shuttle you over to Minnehaha Park because the parking gets filled up, pretty quickly. And we're kind of finishing everything up by 3 o'clock.
It sounds like a wonderful time. Now, for people that want to stay connected to the work of NAMI, can you please provide us with your web address and any of your social media handles?
Absolutely. So our web address is just NAMIMN for Minnesota.org. We have a national organization website too, but if you come to the Minnesota one, you will find our booklets and fact sheets, upcoming classes, things like that. And then we're just at NAMI Minnesota, both on X and Instagram. We are at NAMI Helps. But yes, definitely check out our social media, follow us, check out the classes and support groups on our website, because all of our stuff, except things like our state conference, even though we still have scholarships available for people, it's all free. So we want to make it very accessible to the community.
I think that's very important for people to know. We often know that anything dealing with money kind of gets people to shy away, especially when they know that they don't have it. So it's nice to know that they can still receive support and be in community with other people that want the best for them without worrying about a dollar sign attached to it.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important for us to provide the classes and support groups for free. And many of our support groups are now online. So, and we have ones for specific populations as well. And so, people can feel very comfortable and don't have to worry about transportation.
And lastly, Sue, please look directly in the camera and just provide a word of encouragement for somebody that is daring to begin their mental health journey this fall or this winter and may find it to be a little daunting.
Just know you are not alone and help is available.
That's well said. Unfortunately, that is all the time for this episode of Community Connections. Thank you, Sue, Abdur Holden, and the amazing team at NAMI.
Thank you again for inviting me today.
We are actively wrapping up this episode of Community Connections. As always, I am your host, Anna Orr. Community Connections has aired right here on OROMIA11. As always, I look forward to connecting with you soon.